All right, Gaudete Sunday, joyful Sunday. Clearly this is my day, you know. This is such an important part of what we should be focusing on, the joy of faith. It's possible to talk about this too much, but that would be rather challenging to accomplish. Having joy in life is absolutely vital. And as you well know, there are many paths to false joy and temporary happiness. Real, lasting joy is more than the feeling we get from, a pleasure high. We get that from recreation and success and all manner of things. But as you well know, that stuff doesn't last. Non-stop parties will not make you happy. And even your favorite show on TV is not going to last forever and satisfy you. Real, lasting joy is more than that. We all have a deep spiritual hunger for a joy that speaks to us as we are as individuals. I'm talking about a joy that is more than pleasure or amusement. So on that note, I got to share something with you. Back in 2006, I attended one of the best masses ever in my life. So my family and I, we were vacationing in St. Martin in the Caribbean, one of our last high-class vacations before the money dried up. So it was 2006. So that meant that at the time I was 24. My 2-year commitment to Peace Corps was about 3 months away, so this is kind of my last hurrah. And I was kind of thinking about the priesthood in the future, maybe kind of a little bit. That's where I was. So our vacation happened to fall over Easter, so of course we went to Mass on Easter Sunday. And I gotta tell you, I walked out of that church a completely new man. I was charged with the joy of faith, which is what today is all about. And from that very moment at Mass to today, I remember that priest as Father Awesome, because I didn't know his name. But he was Father Awesome because something in that Mass moved me in a way that nothing did in my life up to that moment. Now, allow me to be clear, as I'm standing here talking to you about Father Awesome from 2006, I'm not talking about a newly ordained priest that did backflips into the church or anything like that. The dude was 70, all right? He was old and he was going bald. That's all I remember. That is it. I don't remember a word of his homily. I don't remember the sound of his voice. I don't remember what he looked like. I didn't have the chance to speak to him before or after Mass, none of that. But in spite of all of that, I was able to detect an undeniable holiness that was just radiating off of the guy. And his holiness resulted in one of the most sacred days of my life. We should always be offended and bothered when people talk about the church as if it's a human organization like any other. It's not. It's just not. It is partially a human organization. Some of the church is very human. Some of it couldn't be more human. We have to pay bills. We have committee meetings. We monitor statistical analysis. We're very corporate in all of those ways. And of course, the church is full of people who are immature, imperfect, selfish, and petty. Right? We're all guilty of that a little bit here and there, right? But it's more than that, because the Holy Spirit moves within the church in spite of our obvious unworthiness. That's my point. from my little story about Mass in 2006 with Father Awesome, something hit me that day. Something plunged into my soul and changed it for the better forever. And it wasn't the homily. It wasn't the music. It wasn't the beauty of the church. All of that was average and forgettable. It was the sacredness of the Mass that hit me, the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, his greatest gift to us. That is the joy of faith that underlies everything else we associate with church. It's always there waiting for us to tap into it. And that's why coming to Mass is always important and always of spiritual value. Even when the priest is in a bad mood, the cantor has lost her voice, and the roof is leaking. Even with all of that, there is still value because the Holy Spirit moves within us and among us. Can you imagine what things would be like if everybody had a moment like that before they turned 17, the age most Catholics get confirmed? In that case, this church would be full every Sunday. We'd be having people stand in the choir because there wouldn't be room for everybody in here. People would be considering a vocation to the priesthood, and we would be an unstoppable force for goodness in the world today. And none of that is really happening right now because those sacred, life-changing moments, they happen in their own time. We don't control that. We can't force that on anybody else as much as we'd like to sometimes. And what worked for you is not necessarily going to be what works for the person sitting next to you. So really, the best thing we can do for the sake of the church, is to always be ready to make that offer, to share what we have, the joy of faith. And to encourage people to keep searching for God if they haven't quite found him yet, because he's there. He always will be. But once you've done those two things to the best of your ability, for the most part, the rest is out of your hands. You gotta let the Holy Spirit work. You gotta let the Holy Spirit do his job. So, with the fear that some of you are thinking that I'm sounding a little evangelical today and not Catholic enough, let's see what our old friend Pope Francis has to say on the subject. Because Pope Francis also has a thing or two to say about the joy of faith. He wrote an encyclical on it, Evangelii Gaudium, the joy of the gospel. So I just want to share with you a few things from chapter 2. This starts on paragraph 84 for those of you that want to check my work. And yes, encyclicals are that long. They're hefty documents. So here I go, from chapter 2. And so the biggest threat of all gradually takes shape. The gray pragmatism of the daily life of the church, in which all appears to proceed normally, while in reality faith is wearing down and degenerating into small-mindedness. A tomb psychology thus develops and transforms Christians into mummies in a museum. Disillusioned with reality, with the church and with themselves, they experience a constant temptation to cling to a faint melancholy lacking in hope, which seizes the heart like the most precious of the devil's potions. Called to radiate light and communicate life, in the end, they are caught up in things that generate only darkness and inner weariness. For this, I repeat, let us not allow ourselves to be robbed of the joy of evangelization. The joy of the gospel is such that it cannot be taken away from us by anyone or anything. The evils of our world and those of the church must not be excuses for diminishing our commitment and our fervor. Let us look upon them as challenges which can help us grow. With the eyes of faith, we can see the light, which the Holy Spirit always radiates in the midst of darkness, never forgetting that where sin has increased, grace has abounded all the more. Our faith is challenged to discern how wine can come from water and how wheat can grow in the midst of weeds. Challenges exist to be overcome. Let us be realists, but without losing our joy, our boldness, and our hope-filled commitment. Let us not allow ourselves to be robbed of missionary vigor. Try to remember that next time you wear something pink. The joy of faith.